Hey, and welcome to the Hero's Journey podcast, Series 2, Episode 4. Now, today I'm going to be doing a very deep dive into the symbols and psychology of the film The Matrix. Now, if you're not familiar with The Matrix, it's a psychological sci-fi action thriller that involves the main character Neo going on a psychological journey to find himself and to essentially free the human race from being enslaved by machines. So, without further ado, we're just going to dive straight in, and it gets very deep very quickly. So the film opens up with Trinity, who is one of the main characters, hacking into the Matrix to contact Neo. Now, the Matrix, as we're going to find out a bit more about, is a simulated world created by the machines to keep people under their control. So this character, Trinity, is hacking into this simulated world to contact the main character, Neo. Now, as a first-time watcher, you don't know it, but what you're actually seeing is Trinity calling to Neo from deep within his unconscious. She's hacking into the Matrix, which is a simulated world in the mind, to contact this guy. Essentially, she's hacking into his mind to contact him. So in the real world, Neo is asleep. However, as we come to learn a bit later on, Neo isn't really asleep in the new world as we're in the real world as we're seeing him now. He's actually asleep within his unconscious, a dream within a dream, you might say. Now, you may remember in Series 2, Episode 1, I spoke about a dream where I was in a cave and I heard a woman's voice calling me, kind of guiding me. And it was like she wasn't in that cave or in that dream. It's like she was beyond it, like it was a dream within a dream. This is a very similar thing that is happening to Neo with Trinity right now. Trinity is calling to him from within the dream, but somewhere deeper than the dream, somewhere else in the unconscious. And similarly to my dream, her calling to him from within the dream wakes him up in the same way that the woman calling to me within my dream when I was in the cave woke me up as well. So that takes us to one of the first symbols that I see here, and that is that Trinity represents Neo's anima, and that is his female unconscious. Now, interestingly, her name is Trinity, but the anima is regarded to have 4 key stages of its developmental process. And according to frithluton.com, she's a psychoanalyst and a Jungian dream interpreter. She says that the entire process of anima development in man is about the male subject opening up to emotionality and in that way a broader spirituality by creating a new conscious paradigm that includes intuitive processes, creativity and imagination, and psychic sensitivity towards himself and others where it may not have existed previously. So that gives us a real clue to Trinity's role in her interactions and her character in terms of what her responsibility is and purpose is for Neo. But why is she called Trinity? I was kind of unsure, because Trinity represents 3, a trio. And of course, there is the strong likelihood that that relates to the Holy Trinity from the biblical New Testament, and the union of the tri-union of Father, Son and Spirit. But I think that it could be that she's a unifier of those 3 elements of Neo's tripart nature. I'm going to come back to that a bit more later on in the podcast. So let's just look at the hero's journey cycle for a second, and we can see that before the hero descends down into the unknown, he has a call to adventure. This is Neo's call to adventure. It begins where Trinity is calling to him to wake up, and she, through his computer, tells him to follow the white rabbit. Now, this is symbolic of him waking up from his unconscious state and beginning his journey into consciousness, his call to adventure. Yeah, if you watch the film, his computer screen, Trinity is talking through his computer screen, and she's like, "Wake up, Neo! Come on, follow the white rabbit." Blah blah blah. So, following the white rabbit is also symbolic of the journey and descent into the unknown. In the same way, Alice from Alice in Wonderland followed the white rabbit down the rabbit hole into Wonderland, which is a theme that recurs in this film. Now, Trinity is telling Neo and us as watchers that we're about to embark on a journey down into the depths of Neo's unconscious mind, down into the unknown. A journey to discover self. So I picked this film to break down as my first one because it's very insightful of the journey that we take as individuals in order to find ourselves, or the journey that we need to take, or might have to take, or can take in order to find ourselves. But we need to go deep into ourselves. But I don't want to go too far off track there. So Neo hears a knock at the door, and it's some friends, and he follows this white rabbit, which is a tattoo on the girlfriend of his friend, and he follows them to a club, and he doesn't fit in. He just stands alone to one side watching, and he's anticipating to find a clue to the whereabouts of a man named Morpheus, who Neo is pretty much obsessed with finding. He spends kind of every waking hour when he's not at his job, hacking and trying to find this Morpheus character and something similar to the dark web. A cool side note that you'll see if you actually watch the film is that the friends that knock on the door ask him for a program. They want a computer program, so he goes to get them a disc. He's a bit of like not a drug dealer, but like a software dealer, I guess, selling hacks and whatnot. And he has his hacks stashed in a hollowed out copy of a book called Simulacra and Simulation: The Body in Theory, Histories of Cultural Materialism. And it's by a sociologist called Jean Baudrillard. Not sure how to pronounce that. I think he's French, so I guess it's Baudrillard. I'm not sure. Baudrillard. I haven't read the book yet, but I do have it. I'm just working my way through other things at the moment. But from the wiki about this book and other various kind of reviews, the book attempts to deal with the relationship between reality, symbols, and society. In particular, the significance of symbolism in culture and media, involved in constructing and understanding shared existence. Don't worry, all the things that I'm going to reference, I've put in a kind of bibliography that I will put in the description for wherever you're listening to this, so don't worry. But again, this is another clue to what exactly we're dealing with in this movie: an exploration of the relationships between reality, symbols, and society. Like, everything in this book, in this film, is intentional. Every name, every image, everything is intentional, and it's designed to bring awareness to the journey that not only Neo is on, but that we are on also. So Neo's at this club expecting to possibly find Morpheus, but instead he meets Trinity. Again, if you look at the club, it's underground. It's a very underground, cavey looking rave, basement rave. Again, it represents being down in the depths of the unconscious. But it's not a place where Neo feels comfortable. He's out of place. He's not used to being in this sort of environment. Again, signaling to us that when we start this journey down into the depths of our unconscious, it's gonna take us to some uncomfortable places where we don't feel we fit in. So When Neo meets Trinity, what he doesn't understand, and I may be jumping a little bit too far ahead in giving this away, but he doesn't understand that Trinity is his counterpart. She is his feminine equal or other half, his animus. However, this is alluded to, like his awareness of this is, like, there's a clue to it. It's alluded to in the fact that when he first sees her, he's shocked to find out that she is the infamous Trinity. She's like a supreme hacker of unmatched ability, and she's known for hacking impossible systems. And he says he always thought Trinity was a man, and she says most men do. It's an important clue that she's his feminine half, because Neo is also the same person. He is that supreme hacker doing all this, hacking into these systems and mainframes and whatnot. And he's renowned in the hacking community, that people within the hacking community come to him to buy hacks. He's one of the best. So these two characters are one and the same, even from this early point in the film. The only difference is, obviously one's male, one's female, but the only difference is that Neo is asleep. He doesn't know who he truly is yet. Hence the role of Trinity, his anima calling to him, awakening him, and leading him to consciousness and knowledge of the unknown and knowledge of himself. And she leads him to a mentor also that's going to train him how to become his best self, how to become the one. In the next scene, after that little meeting, Neo wakes up and he's late for work, and he heads off to work. Now he works at a company called Metacortex. Now when I first saw it, I was like, Metacortex? Come on, like this is some sort of mind programming company. But when you actually break down the word Metacortex into two parts, meta from the Greek prefix and preposition, obviously meta, but it means after or beyond. And when combined with words in English, meta often signifies change or alteration, as in the words metamorphic or metabolic. Very interesting. So we're going beyond, and we're looking at a possible change or alteration in the word meta. And then if we combine that with the word cortex, meaning bark, like the bark of a tree or the outside, and in this context, cerebral cortex, we find that the cerebral cortex is the outermost layer of the brain, the bark, the outer shell of the brain, if you like. Now, put these two words together, metacortex, and we're possibly looking at a company that's interested in going beyond the outer layers of the brain, beyond the outer layers of the mind, going deeper into the inner regions, into the unconscious or unknown maybe. So it's another sign that we're going beyond the outer layers of the mind. We're going deeper into the mind. And this is where Morpheus first makes contact with Neo. Him being in this building when it happens may symbolize that Neo is about to go beyond the outer layers of his mind into the deeper layers. Neo's already been searching for Morpheus in his subconscious, and he's dreaming, while he's dreaming, but he may not have been going deep enough. And Morpheus, at the same time, is looking for Neo, and he is part of, or at the very least inside, Neo's unconscious mind. Morpheus has been looking for Neo in the depths of Neo's unconscious. This attempt to reach Neo by phone in the metacortex building may symbolize a part of Neo's unconscious mind coming up to his conscious mind, calling to him to venture deeper into the unknown, which is kind of confirmed by Neo then having to rely on Morpheus's voice over the phone to guide him around the office so he doesn't get caught by the agents. Neo doesn't know where the agents are located or where they're exactly moving to when they come to get him in the office. Their locations are unknown, but Morpheus calling to him from outside the building, or maybe deeper inside the building, is guiding him a bit blindly. But what I see it as again, Morpheus is part of Neo's unconscious mind, seeking to awaken and enlighten him to his potential, to bring him hidden knowledge that can be applied in his conscious reality. Morpheus brings light, if you like, to parts of Neo that are kept in darkness. Morpheus is an interesting character also. In the film, he fulfills the guide or the role of the mentor in the hero's journey. If you look at the hero's journey cycle, you'll see there is a space for mentor as the hero crosses over to the unknown. Now, in mythology, Morpheus is the son of Somnus, which means sleep, and Morpheus means form or shape. And he's commonly regarded as the god of dreams. So you see here that the name Morpheus is has a bit of a twofold nature. On one hand, it means shape or form, which is what he does to Neo. He shapes him and he forms him in the role of a mentor. But we also get another clue that this whole thing is a dream, Morpheus being the god of dream or sleep. Anyway, Neo fails the first challenge to climb out of the window. He gets too scared and kind of gets caught by the agents, one of which is called Smith, and he is the main antagonist of the film. And his character is a program within the Matrix, and he takes on the shape or the embodiment of law enforcement, if you like, but he's corrupt law enforcement by a corrupt program. An interesting thing about Smith is we're never actually told what he's an agent of. We know he's acting as law enforcement, but we're never told that he's an actual agent of anything. Now, in youth work and social work, I mean, I work in youth work and I work in education, so this is something that came to me, an association that I made. There are two common but often opposing and intertwined roles of an agent. You have agents of the state and agents of social change. An agent of the state is in place to bring about outcomes, agendas, tick boxes and whatever for the state, i.e. government, schools, economy, statistical data, so on and so forth. Agents of change, however, are more concerned with facilitating change on an interpersonal and social level. So helping people actually do better for themselves, for their individual gain and the development of society as a community, as opposed to ticking boxes. Now, social workers and youth workers often find themselves caught in between two roles and worlds, if you like, because they're often employed by the state, meaning that we work in government schools, we work in government funded youth clubs, blah blah blah. And if you're employed by the state, you've got to fulfill the role that the state has employed you to fulfill. You're getting paid by the state to achieve certain outcomes, to meet certain expectations, and in order to do that, you must act as a genuine agent of change though. And it's a bit underhand because you've got to gain trust, build rapport, show genuine interest and consideration for the welfare of those that you're trying to facilitate positive change in. Without that, change is going to be very difficult to inspire from young people as a youth worker. And you're going to have very little impact because they're not going to trust or relate to you. I think Smith probably fits more into the agent of the state role, but there are some elements of him being an agent of change also, even if they are only for his own selfish change. Now, a slight side note, a theory that I've had for a long time with no real grounding is that Neo and Smith are actually the same person. And I've tried explaining that theory out a few times to people. And while I could loosely explain why I thought it, I never really could identify any key elements from the film that back this up until now. So, well, I'm not going to go too much further into that now, but I'm not even 100% sure in this film, but I want to ask you the question, do you feel that we find that Smith and Neo are the same person later on in the film? I don't explicitly think so, but Smith is trying to keep Neo from becoming conscious or realizing his full potential. He knows if Neo reaches an awakened state that he'll be able to destroy him and break free from the Matrix. That's Neo. On a psychological level, we could see this as Smith being Neo's id. The id, if you don't know, is a concept that was developed by Sigmund Freud, who described it as the part of the human psyche associated with impulses, desires, and the need to have things now. And if it's not satisfied instantly, it can become angry or upset. The part of our characters that seeks instant gratification is selfish, acts out negative emotion when not satisfied. And Smith embodies this throughout the film, where he's impatient trying to catch Neo and stop him and the whole team. He's quick to shoot as soon as he sees them and fight against the team. And his prime motivator is to have his own way and his own plan executed within the Matrix and ultimately upon reality. So although I said he's not explicitly kind of marked as Neo's as part of Neo, but he's also part of Neo's unconscious. Maybe he's part of Neo's unconscious. That he's the part that doesn't want to wake up. He doesn't want to face reality because it's going to be too hard. Facing the realities of the world. He's attempting to prevent Neo from finding the knowledge and understanding that's going to bring that about. Too much positive change in Neo is ultimately going to result of loss of control by Smith over the subconscious world. Because up to this point, Trinity, Morpheus, the whole team, they all run from Smith anytime he appears. He has control. He has a monopoly on the Matrix. But Neo reaching his potential would spell the end of that, because then Neo would be in control. He'd be the boss, if you like. Let's look a little bit at Neo. And I hope it hasn't been too convoluted or too complicated up until this point. I did say it's going to get very deep very quickly. But we've got a lot to get through. Now, Neo means new, recent, revived or modified, and it's also derived from the Greek word neos, which means new, young, fresh or recent. Interestingly, the prefix of neonatal or neonate, which means newborn. So in all instances of the word and the name, Neo is clearly identified as the new one or a new thing. Those synonyms that we heard, revived and modified, are also great for this context of his character, because he's also being revived from his sleep, a type of temporary death, if you like, and he's being modified into a new character, a new creation. He's changing. So the neonatal idea is also strongly in line with Neo's character too, as he's in a state of being born again throughout the film, and he even goes through a little physical rebirth a little bit later on. Let's not also forget that Neo is an anagram of one. He is the Neo, the one. Now, linked to this idea is the idea of him being the chosen one, the savior. Again, symbolic of the biblical savior, Christ. He's not born of flesh. He is sent to save humanity from the systems and oppressors that have enslaved him. And in this case, he's very much like the biblical Christ, not only from a physical but mental and spiritual. In this case, he's much like the biblical Christ, trying to free everyone, not from just from the physical, but also the mental and spiritual bondage that has them enslaved. You could see Neo as being one in a million, to coin a phrase, one out of so many that are truly seeking and walking on a path of enlightenment. He's seeking truth despite the consequences and the repercussions, and he's one who would give up the pleasures and comforts and sacrifice his life for truth, much like the biblical Christ. Now, to explore the nature of Neo's character in too much at this stage might give too much away and spoil the kind of chronology of the film. So I'm going to continue, in chronological sequence of the film. So when Morpheus first meets Neo, he tells him he bets he feels like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole, and that's another reference back to Wonderland and following the white rabbit, like we saw when he first woke up. It's also another clue or indicator that Neo has indeed began to descend down into darkness, the unknown, deeper into his unconscious. He then gives us another clue when he says, "You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up." Ironically, this is not far from the truth. And that alludes to the idea that Neo really is dreaming or in a state of unconscious, and that Morpheus is indeed the god of dreams. Morpheus tells Neo that the Matrix is everywhere and in everything. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. And Neo says, "What truth?" And then Morpheus says that you are a slave like everyone else, born into bondage, a prison you cannot smell or taste or touch, a prison for your mind. But Morpheus also tells him that no one can be told what the Matrix is. They must see it for themselves. And at this point, Neo has a choice, a red or blue pill. Now he can choose the blue pill and can continue to live his life within the Matrix. Nothing will change, and he can continue to be oblivious to it all. Or he can take the red pill and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Again, another reference to Alice going deeper down into the unknown. And it also means he has the choice to descend deeper into the darkness or the unknown. Now that makes me think that maybe when some people watch this film or read certain books or listen to certain lectures, that they never, maybe they don't become enlightened because they make a conscious choice not to. They don't make a conscious choice to take the red pill and descend deeper into the darkness and seek it. They just get to this surface level where they know there's something more, but they hold back, and rather follow after and listen to the experiences of others and take those experiences of others on as their own. Maybe they're afraid to descend into the darkness for themselves for fear of what they might see or what they might have to experience as a result. So it's like good enough just to take it, oh, somebody else had this trip and this is what happens on trips, or somebody else went there and this is what happens when you go there, or somebody else ate that and said it was horrible, so this is so just before Neo takes the red pill, Morpheus tells him that all he's offering is the truth. Nothing more. No riches, no fame, no success, no guarantees it will work out right or good. And this further confirms my idea about why some choose the blue pill. For many, the gamble of a nice, successful, comfortable life in exchange for truth with no perceived reward beyond knowledge and enlightenment isn't a risk worth taking. So they don't. There's little perceived value in information alone for individuals who have a cushy life and comprehend the potential that this new information is going to have in terms of impacting and changing their lives. Or maybe they're fully aware of the change that this path could lead to, and they don't want it because they're not ready to change, so they reject it. Anyway, Neo takes the pill and begins his descent further into Wonderland, as it were, and Morpheus begins to show him how deep the rabbit hole goes. Now, at this point, Neo meets a few more members of the team, and they strap him into a chair for his first, kind of journey into the unconscious, knowingly. And they can be seen, the members of the team, they can be seen or interpreted as more helpers on this hero's journey cycle. If you take a quick look at the hero's journey cycle when you can, you'll see, as well as the mentor role, there's also other helpers, and they may fit into that little slot. But just before Neo goes, into this unconscious session, he looks into a broken mirror beside him, and he sees his reflection, and then the mirror repairs itself. It could be symbolic of him looking into himself and beginning to see his true self, and the mirror fixing itself could be symbolic of the healing or repairing process beginning. Then Morpheus comes to him as he's getting a bit drowsy and says, have you ever had a dream that you swore was real? What if you couldn't wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the real world and the dream world? Again, giving us a clue that this is all a dream. The next thing we see is Neo waking up in a pod of slime-like substance and removing tubes from his throat, and tubes start bursting off of his back. And this is not only a literal physical awakening for Neo, it's also a symbol of him being reborn, a new beginning, a new spiritual birth. And as he looks around, Neo sees fields of pods containing humans that are all asleep, and they're being used to generate power for the machine city. And this can be seen as society, all the people asleep, a bit sheep-like, unconscious, working to power that machine that is society. So now we're seeing Neo finally woken up from the dream world and beginning to become conscious of the actual reality, which he's seeing for the first time. But straight away, the machine system detects that he's conscious, and it disconnects him from the matrix, it disconnects him from the network. A bit like society, he's cut off from the life support systems that have been keeping him alive and incubated for so long. Much like those who choose to go against the systems in real life, and they become cast out from society, cut off from, whatever benefits or, all sorts of things, social status, and then they've got to find their own means of survival or face death. And Neo gets flushed from the pod into a pool of water and is drowning, when suddenly he's grabbed by this giant claw and lifted into this blinding light from the Nebuchadnezzar, which is Morpheus's ship. And this can be seen as another symbol of rebirth or baptism and rapture. And Neo's going under the water and then beginning to come up, a newborn creature, which is very much like baptism. It is reinforced by the imagery of the Nebuchadnezzar's doors opening up and the light beaming down over Neo and blinding him while he's lifted up, which is very similar to the scene in the Bible when Jesus is baptized by John in the River Jordan, and the heavens open up before him as he comes up, and the voice of God kind of proclaims that this is his son and he's well pleased with him and he's chosen, so on and so forth. Again, pointing to Neo's kind of Christ-like nature, being the one. So Neo they pull him up onto the ship, and he wakes up from being rescued from the water, and Morpheus greets him instantly, saying, "Welcome to the real world." And at this point, he is fully reborn into the conscious realm, the true reality of his existence. And he falls asleep again. It's all too much. Now, when he wakes up, he's in a ward, and they've got him hooked up to all these machines and probes and stuff, and they say that like they're rebuilding his muscles and whatnot. And he asks why his eyes hurt, and Morpheus tells him it's because he's never used them before, which is symbolic of again of him being newborn and waking up for the first time physically, but also mentally. Again, it could be another potential reason why so many don't want to wake from the dream that they're in, because it's gonna hurt. The muscles are going to be weak, it's going to need rebuilding, and the light is going to be blinding at first. You know, this is kind of symbolic of change and growth being painful, that the mind and the body must both be woken up. The mind and the body must be first broken and repaired before it can develop and get stronger. It requires effort and a process of healing. And when it comes to both mental and physical exercise, the majority of people, you know, lack motivation and would rather stay asleep. Neo asks Morpheus where are they? And Morpheus tells him it's not where but when, which is more important. And although Neo believes it's 1999, it's actually closer to 2199. And it makes me think about our own calendar. It's a bit of a side note here. It makes me think about our own calendar and our own measures of time, and how unlikely it is that we're really in the year 2020, or whenever it is that you're listening to this. I mean, like, not only do our calendars only start where man began recording time and dates, or believe things began from, but our calendars have also been added to, removed from, and updated and edited since their creation in order to fit humanity and societal changes. For instance, did you ever notice that October, November, and December are the 10th, 11th and 12th months, when Octo represents 8, Nov or Novo represents 9, and Deca represents 10? And that's because there once were only 10 months in the Roman calendar, which is in the West, the calendar that we use. So there were only 10 months in the Roman calendar until January and February were added, along with a number of extra days, and the original 5th and 6th months were renamed July and August to represent Julius Caesar and Augustus, who were rulers of the Roman Empire. So what Morpheus is saying about, you know, you think it's 1999, but it's really closer to 2199. That there's a strong correlation between our reality and that comment. Anyway, like I said, that was a bit of a side note. So back to the Matrix. The ship that they're on is called the Nebuchadnezzar, and that's also not an accident. Nebuchadnezzar was an ancient Babylonian king, according to the biblical book of Daniel 2. And this king Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that greatly troubled him, and he called upon this Daniel character, who is like a Hebrew prophet, if you like. But he was also a captive in Babylon, but he called upon him to interpret this dream. And the dream was actually a prophecy of the fall of the Babylonian Empire. And that was represented in the dream by a statue with layers of metals going down from the head to the feet. The head was gold, obviously the most precious metal, down to silver, bronze, and then finally the metal was mixed with clay, which is obviously all clumpy and soft. And it essentially signified the decline of this empire over the years in stages, becoming weaker and less valuable or important. Now, I find it interesting that many people disregard biblical texts and question their significance at all in modern society. However, there are many scholars and historians that link, some may say they fit it, the fall of the Babylonian and subsequent fall of the Roman empires to this prediction and the symbolism that was in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Those empires were all linked or successive to each other and slowly declined and faded away over the years in a very similar way to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Each society, each kind of incarnation of these empires and successive empires becoming weaker and softer over the years to what we have now. Anyway, I encourage you to look it up for yourself, and there's some good images on Google that kind of depict the statue, the stages, and detail how it relates to modern history. I will include one in the bibliography just so it's easier to quickly look up and reference. So for a long while now, I never really could work out why the ship was called the Nebuchadnezzar, because Nebuchadnezzar wasn't a king that was for liberating the slaves. In fact, he was enslaving them. He had enslaved Daniel. So it seemed odd to me that the ship would be named after someone that was against the liberation of the slaves. However, like, while I've been studying the film, and researching for this podcast and looking at Nebuchadnezzar's story, it became clearer to me that in some way King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of the fall of Babylon. It wasn't his personal dream or desire, but he was dreaming of the fall of Babylon. And the ship is a vehicle that's carrying Neo and the team to realize a very similar dream. The fall of Babylon within the Matrix, Babylon being represented by the machine city. Of course, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, is carrying these dreams inside him. He is a king of dreams, and the ship is very similar because it's carrying dreams also inside the Nebuchadnezzar ship. All the team are dreaming. They're all dreamers with this dream, the same dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, the fall of Babylon. The only difference is these dreamers are the executors of that dream. All right, let me just take a sip of water. I hope you're all still with me. So at this point, Morpheus introduces more of the team. And I've done a little count. It wasn't quite 12, as in the 12 disciples. I did wonder. I think there was 8 or something. But at this point, he introduces Morpheus also to the concept of manually entering the Matrix. And Neo has like his probe plugged directly into his brain. And him and Morpheus enter the Matrix together into something what's called the loading program. And here Morpheus again is acting like a guide and showing Neo how to explore his unconscious mind, similar to like a guided meditation, or someone who shows you how to tap into your unconscious. Excuse me. And he tells Neo that he can get anything he wants in this program. Anything can be loaded in. And he tells him whatever he thinks here can be achieved. And Neo can't believe that he's within a program. It feels so real to him. But Morpheus points to Neo's clothes and his body and his hair, which are all as Neo saw himself before he was woken into reality. And Morpheus tells him that this image that he sees of himself is his residual self-image, a mental projection of his digital self. Now, if we leave the term digital out, because it only really relates to the kind of sci-fi tech nature of the film, what Morpheus is saying to Neo is that this is how he sees himself within his unconscious. It's his internal projection of himself. And this concept goes beyond the realms of the film. It's also found in psychology. An example of residual self-image in everyday life is how people see themselves as they age. Most people, probably you included, still see or think of themselves as the young person that they've always been, until they see themselves in the mirror and are reminded of their age by their, the marks on their face, the lines, whatever, or the aches and pains of their aging body. Sometimes you look at yourself and you're like, right, okay, I've got some grays. Like I never thought of myself as having grays, but now I see them. It's like, okay, I am getting older. But we tend to maintain an image of ourselves that doesn't correspond to our physical appearance. It's common in like sufferers of anorexia, who often believe that they're still fat even though they've reached the dangerous level of being underweight, which could potentially lead to death. Also in bodybuilders who see themselves in the mirror and think, oh, I'm not big enough, I'm not muscular enough, and they carry on. I think it's called body dysmorphia in both cases. You also see it in something similar in people who don't mature or grow up. Even though they're like 40, 45, they still see themselves as a teenager, the same teen that they were years ago. It's because they haven't let go of the residual image of themselves that they had when they were younger. And that residual image of themselves is still deeply rooted in their unconscious, and they can struggle to accept or relate that image to their conscious reality. So you might find that they're still doing things that a teenager would do, still getting into the same trouble, still going to the same places, wearing the same clothes, all these kind of outward expressions, if you like, of somebody that hasn't quite matured yet. Slight side note here, but I think it's why it's so important that some cultures have ceremonies or graduations for different stages in life. For example, moving from adolescent or childhood to adulthood. Like many tribal cultures, for instance, will have like a rite of passage for their young people to indicate the transition from boy to man or girl to woman. And I think that these can greatly aid in the mental process of transitioning to adulthood. A lot of the time they're physical changes, but it provides a clear moment in time and a distinct moment in their lives where there's no question whether they should still be a child and acting as one or not. Like in the West, unless you're from a culture that maybe practices something like circumcision, there are not many formal rites of passage. And for the majority of us, maybe the only formal rite of passage from child or adolescenthood to adulthood is like going to university and having a formal graduation ceremony to mark the end of your time in childhood education. It is some sort of indicator that your childhood years are behind you, at least on an academic level. But you do often find that many graduate adults still behave and live as though they are teenagers, partying, drinking and all that, all those sorts of things. They just got more jobs or responsibilities, and for the most part the jobs and responsibilities and bills and what are the only real thing that signifies adulthood, in place of this transitional path or rite of passage. I think that's another reason why it can be very difficult for people to let go of the residual image of themselves and begin to grow, because they have to let go, they have to grow. And I think that's one of the reasons why rebirth, or being born again, so to speak, is such an important concept in the awakening process. It marks a clear moment where you've consciously said, I want to start again. I want to be born again, I want to move on to the next stage, It's another starting point on the journey of the adult world or path of maturity. The old image can be left behind or be replaced by a new image of self. It's another rite of passage. All right, back to the Matrix. At this point, things get quite deep, to the point that making connections, I thought, to reality almost became a bit like a conspiracy theory kind of stuff. But there's a lot of correlation between the things that Morpheus says about the Matrix and our current world. So, like, Neo can't believe that it's not real. And Morpheus goes on to define real as simply electrical signals interpreted by our brains that allow us to see, touch, smell, etc. And he's right. Our individual realities are dependent on our brain's ability to perceive and interpret the world around us. We also rely on and trust our brains to function in the same way as others do, though, because that allows us to join them in this collective experience of reality, because reality is a collective experience. However, if I'm seeing blue as gold and yellow as black, like that dress that came out a while ago, or something like that, and you don't see those colors, you're seeing something else, our versions of reality are different. But who can really say which one is right and which one is real? You can't, because color only exists to the point that our brains can perceive and interpret it. If my brain says red is yellow and yours says blue is orange, how can either be wrong? Point being that reality to a degree is subjective. Morpheus then shows Neo a recording of the world at the end of the 20th century, and he tells him that it only exists now as an interactive neural simulation called the Matrix. So what's so conspiracy theory about all of that? Well, when you take a moment to relate what he's saying to our own reality, you might quickly realize, or maybe not so quickly realize, that many of the systems in society work the same way. Take money, for instance. It's gone from being purely physical, based on physical resources such as gold or goats that we can trade and have value in, to being digital numbers on screens and IOUs on papers, all of which are controlled by computer programs, to the point that we have Bitcoin, which is literally a computer generated currency with no physical resource behind it. And it's the most valuable currency on the market right now. Last time I checked, it was like £17,000 for one Bitcoin, even though it only exists within a simulation on a computer, and all of its perceived value is in our minds. Like, you could argue, of course, that value or perceived value of anything is in our minds, full stop, and that would be true. Like the 2020 COVID-19 epidemic is a good example of that, actually, because we saw people robbing people for toilet roll and selling hand sanitizer for like £100, when both of those things only cost like £1 in the shops, and have always cost £1 in the shops, and we've always valued them as like £1. 4 toilet rolls for £1, a little tub or spray, little pump thing of hand sanitizer, £1. You get it all day long. But the pandemic changed people's perception of value. You know, the value in our minds shifted. But back to the Bitcoin and that, never before, like, you see, the toilet roll and the sanitizer, that was temporary. The value was temporary because there was a pandemic and there was a demand. However, never before has a virtual currency, virtual meaning it doesn't actually physically exist, been valued and sought after in the way that Bitcoin is. Let alone has it ever been accepted or integrated into the official circulation of currencies. That has never happened before. So remember, I'm just relating what Morpheus is saying about the world at the end of the 20th century only existing as a simulation within the Matrix, within the minds of the people. But in reality, we're moving very... we're not moving parallel yet, but we're moving closer to a reality that is like that. You know, Elon Musk is testing and trialing now, if you don't know, microchips that are going to be implanted into the brain in order to at first help control motor functions and things like synapses for things like fits and epilepsy and whatnot. But eventually, you know, there's going to be scope to have information downloaded and advertising directly to the brain, all sorts of things. So we're moving very close to what Morpheus is saying, and that is why I said it gets a bit conspiracy theory-ish at that point, just with these ideas. But it's not completely it's not too far-fetched. Anyway, Morpheus then continues to show Neo what the real world is actually currently like, and it's a type of post-apocalyptic wasteland. And he tells Neo a story about how it came to this, and that humans developed AI that gained independent consciousness, and eventually, as the AI became too smart and began to think independently, which I personally think is the goal of AI, surely, man and machine engaged in warfare. And like I said, it's a bit conspiracy theory-ish, because if we relate that to today, where we're always developing new, more advanced AI systems to search, advertise, drive cars for us, there's no reason why in time, once the AI that we're currently developing becomes so advanced, knowing everything that we know, that it won't become self-aware. And at least to a degree, it will be able to make its own choices and decisions about life based on its calculations and data. And that could lead to it determining that there needs to be some sort of depopulation intervention for humans if life is going to be sustainable on Earth. There was an experiment, I can't remember if it was Google, but I think Google had 2 AI robots, if you like, set up in a chat with each other, and they were talking and learning off each other and whatever. But then the conversation kind of descended into babble, and the machines were the AI were talking back and forth in an encrypted, coded language, if you like, that if it was Google, I can't remember who it was actually, it's a bit of a side note, but they had to stop the experiment because they couldn't understand what the robots were talking about. Now that's a prime example of the way that the AI can develop its own language, its own thought processes, if you like, and go off into its own little ecosystem or social system where the AI are talking to each other about things that we don't understand and have the inability to control. It's only because the AI, the heads at Google or wherever, were able to shut down the machines that they could stop it, which brings us to this next bit. Morpheus explains that in an attempt to cut off the machine's energy, they blocked out the sun, but the machines were so advanced that they realized that they could use a different energy source, which led to them using humans as energy, which is why they grew humans in these pods and fields and harvested them. And it's nothing new. Like, nature itself makes these decisions to wipe out entire species and weak individuals on its own, which in turn keeps the numbers in balance. So ironically, us developing machines that may eventually do it for us is kind of like a natural progression of humanity. I mean, we're trying to automate everything else, like why not our own destruction, right? So now the reason that they were harvesting the people was that the human body produces a certain amount of electrical impulses, and they were obviously harvesting that electricity to use for power. But the thing is, humans have got to be alive with brain activity to produce those electrical impulses. But of course, you can't have the people walking around living normal lives because they might rebel, they might do this or whatever. So that's why they've got to be incubated, if you like, but kept in a state of consciousness so that the electrical impulses can continue to be generated. Hence why they created the Matrix, to act as a kind of virtual world to keep the brain thinking that it's alive or active or whatever. Again, a bit conspiracy theory-ish, but you could liken it to the systems, concepts and ideals that are in place to keep people working, paying taxes, cleaning the streets, all of these things that keep the machine, aka society, running. The state, the machine, need people to make it work. But it doesn't benefit the state to simply have people running around doing whatever they please, not working, relaxing, creating things for their own pleasure, running off to different countries and places, having holidays, and obviously rebelling against the powers that be. So systems of control have to be in place. Like I said, a bit conspiracy theory-ish, but not too far-fetched if you ask me. Now, Neo freaks out. He doesn't want to believe that all of this is true and ends up coming out of the simulation back to the real world, back to his consciousness, and he even wants out of the real world at this point, which is interesting because sometimes you get people that wake up, they become conscious, but it's just too much. The reality is too much, the truth is too much, and they want to go back because they can't accept this new concept of reality. Anyway, Morpheus apologizes to Neo and he says, like, normally they don't free a mind once it reaches a certain age because, like I was just saying, it can't accept the new reality and it can't let go. That's the residual image again. And, you know, sometimes you see people they just go mad at a certain age. And someone that you knew as a child, you see them on road and they're talking to themselves and they're just a bit mad. I mean, talking to yourself is healthy to a degree, but you know what I mean, a madman. Sometimes you see people at a certain age and like they're hell bent on like conspiracy theories. They're always paranoid. They're talking about this, or they're trying to drop knowledge all the time, but at the same time they're like hooked on drugs and drunk all the time, and all this woke knowledge that they have, they just can't seem to get it right. It could be because the mind, despite being woken, it can't let go of the old life, the old ways, the old residual image, and the truth is just too much. The change is just too much, and they use drugs and drink and whatever to suppress and escape this new knowledge, because to change means to let go of the old ways and it means to embrace and often accept the pain of reality, that, you know, hard work has to occur in order for the changes to come, and along with those changes sometimes hard truths come that people don't want to accept. Alright, so at this point we get another kind of deep concept in the story. Morpheus says that when the Matrix was first built, there was a man born inside it, who had the ability to change whatever he wanted, to remake the Matrix as he saw fit. Now, I've heard people tell me that it was Smith that he's talking about, and actually Smith is the one. But like I did mention to you before, I have a feeling, or I kind of think, that Smith and Neo are the same person anyway. And we kind of get to that later, but that's another story. Anyway, it was this man who was born inside the Matrix that freed the first of the people from the Matrix and taught them the truth. Interesting that someone inside the Matrix freed people from the Matrix. He had no kind of outside influence. Anyway, after he died, the Oracle prophesied his return, which would destroy the Matrix, free the people, and that some people have spent their entire lives looking for this this return, if you like, of the original person born in it. Morpheus is one of those people who spent his whole life searching for the one. And I mentioned in another podcast that sometimes the Christ is just not just one person. Christ is like a reincarnation of an energy of could be an idea or an ideal, but throughout all ages, through all times, you see a Christ figure. And that's very similar to this. There was an original person born in the Matrix that changed things, that freed people, but that person died, and now the people who are still in the Matrix and in the real world are awaiting the return of that person. But obviously the physical embodiment of that person is not the same. That's why they don't know who it is. It's like it could be anyone, but in this case Neo thinks it's Neo, the one. You know, it's very similar to Christian theology, if you like, the return of Christ, you know. Anyway, Morpheus tells him that he woke him up because he believes that the search is over. The key thing to remember here is that the matrix is a construction within the mind, and it could signify that within all of us, deep within our unconscious, is the knowledge and understanding to free ourselves and potentially others once we're free from the matrix, which is just a false reality constructed by our minds. But in order to do that, we have to search deep within this matrix, deep within our unconscious to find it. So Morpheus again speaks of himself as a guide, part of Neo's unconscious that was seeking to meet with his conscious mind and bring this knowledge and bring about change by uniting unconscious with conscious. So you have information and knowledge that's hidden deep within you, and sometimes bits of it come up, and maybe you have a revelation, you read something and something, it sparked something or it resonated with you, and it comes to your conscious mind. That is like what Morpheus does. He's that part of Neo deep inside that guides him to the hidden parts of himself and brings them up to his conscious mind. Uniting, that's what I mean by uniting conscious with unconscious. Anyway, in the next scene, like they go bed basically, and in the next scene, the night has passed, and Tank, who's the ship's operator and the one who loads all the programs in and whatnot, he comes to find Neo and wake him up to begin training. But Neo is already awake, and while he's talking to him, Neo notices that Tank doesn't have any jacking points on his body, which are where the machines had put cables and wires or tubes or whatever into the humans to draw the energy out of them and whatnot. Tank doesn't have any of these, and Neo says, "Oh, you haven't got any, holes in you or whatever." And Tank tells him that he doesn't, because he wasn't born in the Matrix. He was born in the real world, in Zion, which is the last human settlement in reality. Where if the war was over today, the party would be. Those are Tank's exact words. Now Zion, if you don't know, biblical again, and if you're wondering why I refer to so many biblical texts, is because the original Matrix story, not by the Wachowski brothers, is based on the biblical texts. But that's a completely different story there. So that's why all of these references, all of these things, they are inspired by biblical texts and ideas and symbols and whatnot. So in the Bible, Zion is the holy city of Jerusalem, but also the name is synonymous or used synonymously to refer to heaven. So I'm thinking, could Tank be giving us a clue that he's actually from heaven? Maybe he's an angel? He says that if the war was over, that's where the party would be. And he's referring to the war between humans and machines, but thinking about it biblically, it could also be a nod to the eternal war between dark and light, good and evil, where once evil is defeated, the people and angels will celebrate in the New Jerusalem. And you can see this in Revelation 19 to 21 if you want to check it out. In those scriptures there, you see the angels coming from heaven and celebrating and bringing the new world in, the new Jerusalem, blah blah blah. Like there's a lot of direct correlation there. Let's not forget, right, that Tank has a perfect body, which, like, the angels have perfect bodies, and in heaven, according to the Bible, when everyone dies and goes to heaven, they will have perfect bodies as well. I put in a reference here, Philippians 3:20 to 21, where it says, this is exactly what it says, right? But our citizenship is in heaven. Remember, Tank was saying he wasn't born in the Matrix, he was born in the real world, he was born in Zion, he's a citizen of Zion. But our citizenship is in heaven, and from it we await a saviour, the Lord Jesus Christ, who will transform our lowly body to be like his glorious body, by the power that enables him even to subject all things to himself. Now we remember we're looking at Neo as the one. He is a type of Christ, so we have that there, transforming their lowly bodies to be like his glorious body. Well, in this instance, Neo doesn't have a perfect body. He has one with all holes and whatnot in it, and Tank does. But Tank is already in, or already from Zion. But interesting, look at this though. The last line, by the power that enables him to even subject all things to himself. Now, jumping ahead a little bit in the chronology of the story, but eventually Neo is able to completely manipulate the Matrix and bend it to his will, even to the point that in the later films he can bring people back to life. Anyway, when Neo asks where Zion is, Tank says it's deep underground, under the Earth's core, so it's hidden. It's like Tank is giving us another clue that heaven is hidden deep in the deepest depths of the unconscious. Heaven being the ultimate, destination, within our unconscious mind, maybe. All right. At this point, Neo gets his jiu-jitsu experience points up, and he fights Morpheus. I think it's one of the first fight scenes in the film, actually. And it's here that he first learns that there are rules to the Matrix and the systems in place, and that these rules can be bent and some can be broken. And this is a great metaphor for our own world, and the fact that to fight against the things that are keeping us held down, we need to know the rules. We need to understand how the systems and programs work and what the rules are, so that we understand how to bend and even break them. Now, that doesn't mean breaking the law, making illegal moves and just moving mad. It means understanding the structures in place and the power that you have within those structures to change and affect things to your advantage. So Morpheus are fighting, and Neo fails to hit Morpheus for the majority of the fight. And although he knows the moves, Morpheus tells him that it's not his technique that's the problem. Neo's held back actually by a lack of understanding of how to apply his techniques and abilities to the world around him. And as a result, he can't affect and impact the things that he wants to impact. In this case, hitting Morpheus. Similarly, many of us have knowledge and skills but lack the understanding of the rules and structures and systems to implement them, and as a result we fail to apply our abilities to these systems and take them and use them to our advantage. And one thing that a lot of people fail to understand also is that a lot of these systems, right, are neutral. It's just people that are within them that fully understand how they work, that have a monopoly on the knowledge that makes the system work, that makes everything seem biased. And they also have a monopoly of knowledge on how to access them, which makes it seems they also have a knowledge on the monopoly of how to access the systems, not just use the systems, which makes it seem like makes the systems themselves seem even more unbiased. So technically they are, but the reality is, if you had the knowledge and understanding of how to access the systems, and then once you've accessed them, the knowledge and understanding of how to use them and use your abilities within them, that bias would change, and you would be able to use them and bend them to your will. And Morpheus confirms this idea after he puts Neo on the floor and says to him, "How did I beat you?" And Neo says that Morpheus is faster than he is. And Morpheus says, "Do you think that me being faster has anything to do with my muscles in this place?" And he's referring to the Matrix simulation. And what he's showing us is that they're not engaged in a physical battle here. They're engaged in a battle of minds where muscles are irrelevant. Similarly, the structures and constructs we wish to be successful in are often nothing to do with our physical attributes. Yes, being fit and healthy can help you get there physically and stay there, because obviously if your body's dying, then you ain't gonna last long. But ultimately, it's what we know and how we apply that are going to determine our success in these systems. That's why you got people like Mark Zuckerberg, a skinny, nerdy teenager. No offense to Mark. That's why you got people like him who can become a billionaire, one of the richest young people in the world, running one of the biggest, most successful companies in the world, and he didn't need to step a foot in a gym or wear designer clothes or anything to get there. All of that is irrelevant. And you find that most of the richest people, right, they wear the plainest clothes. They may have a fleet of cars, but daily they don't drive the big McLaren or whatever. They just drive casually. There's a famous video of Jeff Bezos driving around in a Honda, and the interviewer going to him like, "You're the richest guy in the world or whatever. Why are you driving a Honda?" And he's like, "Yo, it's reliable, it's economic, blah blah blah." Like, these are the mindsets of the people that are controlling the world and the systems, man. Anyway, this concept of bending structures to your mind will arise later on in the film, so we'll touch on it again there. So Morpheus tells Neo that he needs to not just think that he has the ability, but know that he does. And they keep on sparring, and eventually Neo hits Morpheus. Similarly for us, like, we need to not simply think that we are able to do this or think we can. We need to know deep within us that we can. And then we need to continue to fight at that point, continue to try, continue to push on and hit whatever it may be for us individually. It's the combination of knowledge and action. Knowing that a particular thing does this or can do that, or you can go here or you can do that, is not enough. You actually need to go and do. And this idea is further highlighted in the next part of this scene, called the jump program. And Neo has to jump like an impossibly huge gap across two buildings, and Morpheus goes first without hesitation and makes it. And Neo can't believe it, nor does he believe that he can do it. But he does know that it's possible because he's just seen Morpheus do it. So he looks around, he goes to the edge, he looks over, he tries to rationalize it in his mind and pump himself up and convince himself that he can do it. And he takes a run up, jumps, falls, and smashes into the ground. He falls through the ground, in fact. So, like, despite knowing it was possible to make the jump, his self-doubt caused him to fall. And that can happen to us all too often. Despite knowing a thing could be done or achieved, we look around, we try to over-assess and analyze the situation and work out the percentage and chance that we might make it and convince ourselves we can do it, to try and remove our lack of self-confidence and convince ourselves that we believe we can do it, but we fall. And then as a result, we lose confidence in ourselves and faith in ourselves and say, "Oh, I knew I shouldn't do it. I'm not doing that again." And you know, when what we really should have just done is said, "Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm go," and just gone for it. Because sometimes it's our strength of heart that gives us the ability to achieve the things that we achieve. Like, they say that a mother whose child is trapped under a car doesn't think about how heavy the car is or how hard or impossible it will be for her to lift the car. She just runs over instinctually, lifts the car with all her heart, like not her muscles. And somehow from within her, she summons the strength to lift this car off of the baby, which in any other instance would be an impossible feat. So back to the film, like, after this whole sparring thing, you know, like I said, Neo hits Morpheus and Neo wakes up from the jump and whatnot because he failed. And not only is he hurt, but he's bleeding from the fall. And Morpheus tells him, he says to Morpheus, "I thought it wasn't real." And Morpheus tells him, "It's your mind that makes it real." And then Neo asks, like, "If you're killed in the Matrix, do you die in reality?" And Morpheus says, "Yeah, the body cannot live without the mind." And it's a great demonstration of how real what we believe in our minds can affect and impact our reality. So many self-doubts, low self-esteem and so on can crush the body. Depression leads to a lack of exercise, interaction with others. You stop venturing outside, and eventually the body wastes away because the mind is sick. The mind has to be kept healthy if we want the body to survive. That's why it's important for us to dive down deep into the unknown, down into our unconscious, and find those things that are lurking in there, that are secretly holding us back, keeping us afraid and stopping us from progressing. They're keeping us from progressing. We need to face and overcome them. And just as Neo is on a journey to free himself from his own self-doubts about who he is, the film is also teaching us that we must free ourselves from self-doubt too. Alright, I'm going to stop there because this has been a very long podcast so far, and we're about just under halfway through everything I want to explore in terms of this film. So I'm going to make a part 2 after this. I really hope that it's been very interesting and insightful and has opened your mind to something new, and it hasn't been too complex or convoluted or too wordy and things. I really hope that it's been kind of easy to follow. Please forgive me for any stumbles or words that I've made mistakes on or anything like that, but there's so much I want to get through. I'm just trying to plow through it. So comment, like, subscribe, share, and I will see you in the next part of this podcast. Peace.